It's well known that art and photos cannot be argued with. And yet, one thing is undisputed. Some paintings and old photographs are simply so disturbing that they send a shiver down our spines. Some pictures look back on frightening background stories or are even suspected of being in league with demonic forces. Forget the boring landscapes that grace your grandparents' living rooms. Here are some cursed images that should be locked away forever. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to learn about one of the most cursed paintings of all time. The hands resist him. Perhaps one of the most famous haunted paintings of our time was created in 1972. Artist Bill Stoneham was inspired by a photograph of him age 5 next to one of his playmates at the time. However, the work that was ultimately created no longer has much in common with the idyllic childhood days. We recognize a terrifying doll and a boy who literally pierces us with his gaze. Behind the two figures in the foreground, countless disembodied hands are knocking against a glass partition, which symbolizes the barrier between the waking and the dream world. Some later owners died mysteriously shortly after purchasing the painting. In February 2000, the painting then appeared on eBay. The frightened seller stated that the characters on the screen come alive at night. Just looking at the picture would be enough to make you feel physically ill. Given that, I think we're lucky that The Hands Resist 'Em has been sitting in an art gallery storeroom for some time. The Crying Boy. The Italian Bruno Amadio, who also appeared as Giovanni Bragolin, was best known for his group of paintings, The Crying Children. It's estimated that he painted up to 2,000 portraits of deeply saddened orphans during his lifetime. However, one of these images, in which we see a boy in tears, should draw attention to some inexplicable incidents. Accordingly, the intact painting was repeatedly found in the ruins of burnt-down houses. Because of this, a scary legend about the crying boy soon emerged. Since his parents had died in a fire, he had to live in the orphanage from then on. This is also the reason why the houses of the later owners also went up in flames. Pogo the Clown. In the early 1970s, John Wayne Gacy was known to those around him as a loving husband, successful restaurant manager, and helpful fellow citizen. Gacy would regularly slip into a homemade clown costume to perform at local events or cheer up sick children at the local hospital. At the time, nobody in the neighborhood could have guessed that the bodies of 28 young men were in Gacy's crawl space and that he had committed at least 5 other murders. After the killer clown was convicted and sentenced to death, he began painting in oils while in detention. One picture in particular is suspected of having absorbed the malice of its creator. After singer Nikki Stone bought the clown's painting in 2001, a series of inexplicable tragedies unfolded in her close circle. From her dog's sudden death to her mother's cancer to a friend's attempted suicide, the picture seemed to bring great misery to those close to the owner. Ultimately, Stone had no choice but to resell the bizarre painting. Samantha Houston. At first glance, nothing seems spooky about the next painting. We see a cute little girl holding a bouquet of roses and looking at us kindly. However, things get much scarier when we look at the background of the artwork. Accordingly, the child is Samantha Houston, who died at the age of 4. In 1887, Samantha accompanied her father to the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, Texas. As the little girl was playing with a ball, she slipped and fell down a flight of stairs. A few days after the tragic incident, the other hotel guests began to describe strange occurrences. These included a small, shadowy figure floating through the hallways and a girly giggle on the stairs. Some believe that the child's spirit still resides in the painting made in honor of the deceased. If you look at the subject long enough, you should be able to catch a blink or a brief twitch of the corners of her mouth. The child and death. Even if we don't usually have much to do with art, we've probably all seen Edvard Munch's work The Scream at some point. However, this is by far not the only disturbing motif that the Norwegian painter brought to the canvas. With the help of the picture The Child and Death, we can understand what shadows the dramatic childhood was to cast on the further career of the artist. When Edvard was a young boy, tuberculosis killed most of his family. His devout father then claimed that this was divine punishment for the sins committed. And many people believe that the Norwegian preserved the pain he experienced as a child in his 1899 work. The desperate girl in the foreground holds her head in disbelief and looks at the viewer almost imploringly. Some even claim to have noticed how the child's gaze follows them. The rustling of the mother's sheets can also be heard from time to time. Lubbock Lights. In 1951, a strange event occurred in the skies of Texas that to this day has still never been explained. Strange objects had been spotted by hundreds of people, including many scientists who were celebrating together in a garden late one evening. Numerous other people were also able to describe the lights or objects, and some people even managed to take photos of them. Blue-green lights appeared in a V-shape in the Texas night sky, with a total of 3 waves of these lights being seen passing overhead at an amazing speed. To this day, eyewitnesses speak of that evening and still cannot understand what they saw. To make things even stranger, the lights have never been seen again, and the scientific community has fallen silent about this strange occurrence. Was this a UFO invasion or something much more realistic? We may never know. The Brown Lady at Raynham Hall. This photograph was taken in September 1936. A photographer saw a strange apparition on the stairs of Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England. He had been taking photos that day for Country Life magazine, but after capturing this image, he shocked the world with what he had witnessed. In the image, you can see the so-called Brown Lady, whose story has been passed down for many generations. She's been seen by many who describe her as a ghost with hollowed-out eyes, but she's never been seen in such great detail as in this photo. Whether the story is true or just made up to frighten small children is not exactly known. However, one thing is for sure, this photo is quite convincing. Bernardo de Galvez. Texas Grand Galvez Resort and Spa opened its doors in 1911. Since the hotel was named after Spanish general and politician Bernardo de Galvez, it made sense to also hang a painting of the historical figure at the end of an aisle. The problem, the portrait seems to have supernatural powers. These hidden powers would be particularly evident when snapping a photo of the artwork. Some people later wondered about the blurriness of their shot. Others even stated that they recognized eerie skulls in their pictures. However, if you kindly ask the 18th century general for a photo, you will be rewarded with a satisfactory quality. Some hotel guests have the feeling of being followed by Galvez's eyes, and looking at the picture is said to trigger an oppressive feeling of cold. Man proposes, God disposes. In the 1920s and 30s, the University of London's Royal Holloway was rocked by a series of gruesome incidents. According to an old urban legend, several students poked each other in the eye with their pencils and then wrote down the words, "The polar bears made me do this," in their own blood. They then took their own lives. Previously, the victims are said to have looked at the painting Man Proposes, God Disposes, which the painter Edwin Landseer made in 1864. The martial motif was in turn inspired by the Franklin expedition. This last research trip of the British polar explorer Sir John Franklin ended in a fatal catastrophe in which all participants died. Even if there are no official records of the student suicides mentioned, the painting is still suspected of bringing bad luck. Anyone sitting in front of the picture during an exam would inevitably fail. As such, it's still traditional to cover the artwork with a Union Jack during trials. The Lake of Blood. A body of water known as the Lake of Blood can be found in Iraq. As the name suggests, it's a bloody red body of water that has remained this way for many years, yet no one knows what causes the water to turn such a blood-red color. Considering how many people lose their lives in Iraq every day, some people say that this is where the blood of all these victims pools after their deaths. Others believe that the lake is where butchers in the area go to drop off their unused meat and byproducts. If you were to ask a scientist, they'd explain that the high salt content of the water causes it to become a deep red color, giving the illusion that the lake has been filled with blood. Whatever the truth may be, it's safe to say that this is a very scary-looking pool of water, if you can call it that. The Stagecraft, or the Hanging Man. When a certain Laura P. saw an old photograph, an inexplicable compulsion crept over her. She absolutely had to get the scene onto the screen. The template was already accompanied by an extremely disturbing legend. The hanged man allegedly only appeared in the background after the photo was developed. After Laura finished the oil painting and hung it in her home, some inexplicable events took place. Among other things, the picture is said to have moved by itself. Objects fell down as if by magic, and a mysterious knocking in the night were among the creepy events. Although Laura received many offers for her painting, she refused to sell it. The fear of what might happen in the house of the future owners was just too great. The Rain Woman. Creative minds know once you're in the flow and the work seems to happen by itself, nothing can stop you. What's usually meant more as a metaphor became a frightening reality in the case of Svetlana Telets. When she painted the picture The Rain Woman, she says she was guided by a foreign power. In fact, it took the artist just 5 hours to complete her disturbing work. Those who later bought the painting immediately returned it shortly thereafter. The owners complained of anxiety, insomnia, and an inexplicable sadness. No less frightening were the cases in which the residents of the house had the feeling that the Rain Woman was watching them. Navy pilot UFO. Chad Underwood had spotted a UFO over the Pacific Ocean back in 2004. He saw it from his plane's window and described it as a white, elongated object, which is why it's still referred to as the Tic Tac to this day. According to Chad, it was a lightning-fast object that was able to maneuver itself in ways that didn't even make sense. However, to make things incredibly strange, it had no obvious propulsion system and therefore did not emit any exhaust fumes. By all means, it seemed as though this jet didn't have an engine. In addition, the flying object was moving back and forth very quickly, as if it were defying the laws of modern physics. Still today, we have no idea what this strange object was, but Chad Underwood only recently broke his silence, though he's been instructed not to speak about the incident and has remained quiet ever since. Was it an alien spacecraft or some other form of UFO? The world may never know. The Anguished Man. To this day, the Anguished Man painting is overshadowed by some big question marks, so we still don't know who really made the picture of the tormented man. Owner Sean Robinson claims to have inherited the artwork from his grandmother. She once told him that the painter who created the disturbing motif mixed his own blood into the paint and committed suicide shortly after completion. As if this backstory wasn't terrifying enough, the image is also meant to emit screams of pain and moans of agony. In fact, Robinson also stated that he once saw the figure of a man in his house one night. So, folks, that's the end of our trip into the scary world of art and photography. Which item scared you the most? And do you know any other pictures that we should definitely avoid? We're already looking forward to your comments. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so that we can find out more about the most terrifying objects of all time. And with that, thanks for watching. Take care and see you next time.